Ever since his brief debut in The Incredible Hulk issue number 180 in 1974, I think it's fair to say that Wolverine has been a flagship character for Marvel, whose popularity has only continued to grow. With his adamantium skeleton and claws alongside his healing factor, Logan has lived a long life which is littered with the blood and bones of his enemies. From a samurai to a World War veteran, I don't think there's anything this man hasn't done, even surviving a nuke in one instance. All of this is possible thanks to his healing factor, which not only restores even the most fatal wounds, but also substantially slows down his aging. However, have you ever wondered what would happen when you strip that vital ability away from him? Well, I have the answers for exactly this in today's video. They say that nobody truly stays dead in a comic book, but what if I tell you that this time around they actually do? To find out all these things and more, join me in this video as I explore every time Wolverine died, but somehow managed to return. Let's get started. The slow bleed. 3 months to die. Long before the death of Wolverine, Paul Cornell's run had already set the stage for that fateful event with his run on the title, with his dual-volume series, 3 Months to Die. It explores the life of Wolverine after his healing factor shuts down due to being infected by a sentient virus, which is something that happens in the 2013 Killable storyline. Since we're talking about his healing factor, I don't think I need to tell you just how vital this ability is to Wolverine, not just for combat, but also as a character. When people think about characters with healing factors, I think that it's fair to say that Wolverine's name is one of the first to come up, which is just one of the reasons why I say it's important for his character even out of combat. Further, Logan's entire persona is built around his power, where he can be reckless and brutal, allowing him to take risks that others would not be able to. Take that away, and what have you got left? Coming back to the plot, after S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists have a look, they confirm what you and I already know, but with added bad news. You see, not only that the virus had overridden and destroyed Logan's healing factor, but due to this happening, the side effect was that the adamantium within his body had begun to poison it. To this end, I believe he's instructed to never pop his claws again, as breaching his skin risks fatal infections, or even the possibility of him bleeding to death, essentially robbing him of his identity, like I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately for him, this secret doesn't remain one for very long, and his old foes Sabretooth and Mystique begin using it against it. Logan is also forced to rely on traditional martial arts, body armor, and firearms, and for the first time in his life, he basically has to learn how to dodge and block attacks. As all of these things begin to take a psychological toll on him, Logan steps down as the headmaster of the Jean Grey School. Yeah, I know, Wolverine is headmaster, huh? In the end, Logan finally seems to break, abandoning his armor to take on the hand ninjas under Sabretooth's leadership, even as all the assassins of Marvel prepare to descend upon him, chasing the bounty on his head. The actual death of Wolverine. Following the events of 3 Months to Die, Logan sets off to find out who had set out the hit on him, even as he's forced to fight one assassin after another. The answer to this is revealed during Chris Soule's series titled Death of Wolverine, which ran as a 4-issue miniseries between September and October of 2014. I loved how this series almost acts as a countdown through Logan's history, almost like a violent eulogy, as he takes on his classic villains like Cyber, Lady Deathstrike, and Viper before arriving at the Weapon X Paradise facility in Nevada. There, he learns the person behind the attacks on him is a scientist called Dr. Abraham Cornelius, the man who was responsible for bonding the adamantium to his skeleton. We discover that this nutjob had been trying to replicate that over the years with other poor souls, but he kept failing as the test subjects didn't have Wolverine's healing factor. To this end, Cornelius had put out the hit on Wolverine to capture Logan alive, in order to harvest his healing factor, not knowing that Wolverine had lost it months ago. When Cornelius does realize that Logan's healing factor is gone, he unleashes his latest creation, Mr. Sharp, upon him, but this proves futile as Logan defeats his nemesis. Even as the Doctor tries to flee, he triggers the adamantium bonding process on 3 test subjects, which leads Logan to make the ultimate sacrifice by saving these individuals by slashing the liquid adamantium reservoir, flooding the room with metal, which begins to coat him from head to toe. As the metal begins to cool and harden around him, Logan manages to inject a regenerative cure on the 3 victims as he steps out into the sunlight and guts Cornelius on the facility's rooftop. Just as the metal now begins to embalm him completely, Logan, with his final breath, looks at the sunset and reflects on his long life, dying finally with his body encased in adamantium, gleaming like a permanent monument. A fitting end, in my opinion, for a hero of his stature. The loophole comeback nobody expected. Old Man Logan joins the main Marvel continuity. I think it's important to note that the thing with Logan's death was Marvel actually committed to it for 4 full years, until 2018's Return of Wolverine, which I'll discuss later in the video. However, despite this commitment, many casual readers who probably picked up an X-Men or Avengers title between 2015 and 2018, might say that Wolverine was still very much present in the Marvel landscape during that time period. I know, I was confused by this in the beginning as well, but it comes down to a clever editorial loop which integrated Old Man Logan as the new Wolverine for Earth 616, despite Laura Kinney, aka X-23, already having effectively taken over deceased Logan's mantle. To understand how exactly they did this, allow me to take you back to the 2015 Secret Wars story arc, where Jonathan Hickman basically destroyed the multiverse and reassembled it into Battleworld, ruled by Dr. Doom. I believe Brian Michael Bendis had also launched a 5-issue Old Man Logan miniseries, where this version of Wolverine crosses over to Battleworld, trying to make sense of his new reality. Which is why, when at the end of Secret Wars, Franklin Richards restores the Marvel Universe back, due to what I can only call comic restructuring, Old Man Logan finds himself permanently displaced into the main Marvel continuity. For that entire duration of time, while the main Wolverine lay entombed in adamantium, Old Man Logan took his deceased counterpart's spot on primary teams and stories alongside his allies like Storm, Nightcrawler, and Jean Grey. I can understand why most readers would never spot the difference between the two. They essentially had the same speech pattern, mannerisms, and costumes. To anyone not reading the fine print, it would look like Wolverine had never left the scene, completely undercutting the fact that Marvel had killed off one of its biggest flagship characters. By the time the real 616 Logan finally made his way back to the world of the living, I believe Marvel was actually forced to write out Old Man Logan from the universe to avoid having two popping claws on the exact same team, which, in my opinion, would actually have been very cool, at least for a while. The Real Resurrection, Hunt for Wolverine, and Return of Wolverine. The 4-year-long void left by Logan was finally ended in 2018, and I really loved how Marvel handled the entire thing. Not by resolving it in a single shock issue. Instead, I like how they decided to frame it as a vast and sprawling puzzle that involved everyone from Daredevil and Punisher to the likes of Iron Man and even his villains. When the X-Men return to inspect Logan's adamantium tomb, to their horror, they discover that his body is no longer entombed within. This leads to a crazy hunt around the world, involving 4 groups, which include the heroes and villains like the ones I just mentioned, across a 4-part miniseries. Finally, in Charles Soule and Stephen McNiven's 5-issue long run, Return of Wolverine, the mystery behind what these groups encounter in their hunt for Wolverine's body is uncovered. The culprit turns out to be a villain called Persephone, who leads a shadowy corporate syndicate called the Sotera. Her ability gives her the power to resurrect the dead as her emotionless, mindless puppets, and she intends to use it to murder key world leaders, revive them as her obedient thralls, and rebuild the world in her image. To this end, she had stolen Logan's body and pulled him back from the dead to turn him into her primary enforcer. I obviously don't need to tell you that this gloriously backfires on her. The spark that rebooted Wolverine's brain didn't just bring him back from the dead, it also unexpectedly rebooted his long-dead healing factor. And I think you can guess what happens next. As his healing factor roars back to life, it systematically burns through Persephone's neural control and heals the part of his brain which is under her control. Just like that, the man who had spent a whole year dying and 4 years dead is back from the dead, and this time, it is really him. Naturally, Persephone and her evil plans are absolutely wrecked by the very man she tried to weaponize, in a way that fully confirms this is the Logan that we know and love. Wolverine's Mother Mold Sacrifice. I think it's beyond any dispute that Jonathan Hickman's House of X storyline is one of the greatest things to have ever come out of Marvel. In the 4th issue of this series, we get an emotional climax of the Krakoan era's opening act. Well, I thought it was emotional until I read the next issue. Anyway, what happens is that Cyclops leads an 8-person strike team, which includes the likes of Wolverine, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, Monet St. Croix, Husk, and Archangel, to infiltrate the Orcus space station orbiting the sun, in order to destroy the Orcus Forge before it can activate the Mother Mold Sentinel. I realized not too long into the issue that this was a mission unlike any that I had seen the X-Men take, as Husk and Archangel are killed immediately, quickly followed by Mystique as their mission gets underway. As the death toll rises, to sever the final anchoring collar connecting Mother Mold to the station, Nightcrawler teleports Wolverine directly on the structure exposed to the solar vacuum, resulting in both of them being incinerated alive. However, just before he dies, Logan manages to slice the mooring free, sending the Mother Mold into the sun to its destruction. Sadly, the remaining team are slaughtered as well by members of Orcus and their Sentinels, and I was shocked to see even Jean and Cyclops are not spared. When I tell you this was a total annihilation, trust me, I'm not exaggerating. Thankfully, in the very next issue, we learn that death is not something that the mutants are bound by, thanks to Cerebro and a group of mutants called the Five. The Five is composed of mutants whose powers work in tandem to essentially grow a fully fledged mutant body intact with their powers, before Professor X implants into them their consciousness and memories that he backed up in Cerebro. The 5 mutants in question are Egg, Proteus, Elixir, Tempest, and Hope Summers. Thanks to the fact that all the fallen mutants, including my man Wolverine, they're brought back from the dead. the one that never came back. Ultimatum. You know how I said no one really stays dead in a comic permanently? Well, it seems like sometimes they do. At least the individual concerned in this instance has. While the Earth 616 Logan has returned from death numerous times now, sometimes thanks to villains and other times, due to advanced technology and his allies, not all of his variants share the same fortune. In my opinion, the counterweight to this constant resurrection can be found in the 2009 Marvel Knights event, Ultimatum, written by Jeff Loeb, that takes place on Earth 1610. In the climax of this event, Magneto triggers a global environmental catastrophe that floods Manhattan and slaughters dozens of heroes, which eventually leads to a showdown between Wolverine and the Master of Magnetism in his citadel to his madness. Despite Logan landing the first blow, Magneto retaliates by directing Iron Man's repulsor blast alongside Cyclops' concussive blast to destroy every cell of skin, muscle, and organic tissue from the adamantium skeleton of Wolverine before ripping that away as well. Unlike 616 Logan, who survived atomic bombs and mystical interference, I think it's fair to say that Ultimate Wolverine's healing factor was completely overwhelmed, with Magneto leaving not even a single cell behind for him to regenerate from. What made this death hit hard for me was the fact that the Ultimate Universe would continue for another 6 years, with Marvel eventually introducing Jimmy Hudson as Logan's son and heir apparent, but Wolverine would never come back to life again. Now I want you to juxtapose this with what I told you so far about the Earth 616 Wolverine's resurrection and the events of Krakoa, and tell me your opinion about how Wolverine's death has been handled in the comics so far. In the end, even though Wolverine's a fictional character, the fact that 616's version keeps being brought back from death, not because he's immortal, but because he's a cash cow, makes me feel somewhat sorry for him. The guy's been denied the peace of death. Instead, his death has been constantly recycled just to drive a narrative, reducing its impact and meaning, as I've discussed in this video. Regardless of this entire Death of Wolverine story arc, including the prelude and his eventual resurrection, this has to be one of my favorite storylines of all time. What's your favorite Wolverine moment? Let me know in the comments below. For now though, it's time for me to say goodbye. Hope to see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.